If you are hunting trouble, lad, you found it.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and on this video I'm going to be doing a look-through and very opinionated and personal ranking of all of the Heartless and Kingdom Hearts 1.5 HD Remix, Final Remix, whatever. Well, yeah, basically I'm looking at them in no particular order. I think just as they're listed on the Kingdom Hearts guide website for enemies for 1.5, which I will link in the description for anybody who wants to check it out. It's a really neat site for everything about the game. But basically, yeah, they have to be heartless. Some of them are bosses, but not all of not all of the bosses are on this list. You know, it's just specifically heartless. You know, and I'm gonna be ranking them both on actual gameplay and aesthetics, and then just taking like the average and making that the final score. It's a 0 out of 5 system with S plus or very expertly crafted ones being given the golden scrumpy. And excuse me if I mess my words up a little bit. I really don't want to have to re-record a lot of lines for this, and I'm doing this very late at night. So yeah, let's get right into it with the first Heartless of the list, the Shadow. Alrighty then, so the Shadow. It has a small chance to drop a potion and a lucid shard. And just for reference, I'll have the sort of a screenshot from the guide website of the enemy on screen as I'm talking about them. And I also apologize if any of the footage loops, because I recorded the footage you're seeing in the background several months ago, and I had to uninstall the game recently to save disk space because it's like 70 gigabytes for some reason. At least the Steam version is. But yeah, the Shadow. They're the Goombas of the game and the entire franchise. Their attacks are very simple. They're very easy to recognize and abuse patterns. But yeah, I think they're a really nice enemy. Gameplay-wise, I'd give them a probably 4 out of 5 Scrumpy. And for design, I'd give them a full 5 out of 5 Scrumpy. Maybe even a golden Scrumpy, but I think 5 out of 5 is perfectly adequate. So yeah, overall they're going to be a 5 out of 5. Starting off very strong with this one. I think they're an absolutely great enemy gameplay-wise and design-wise. Very iconic within RPGs in general. And yeah, that's basically it for the Shadow. The Giga Shadow. A much larger version of the regular Shadow, which is found specifically in the Bazaar Room after you've completed Wonderland. I think when you get into the late game stage of the game, when you have all that stuff unlocked. Basically, it's a gimmick enemy that you can get cool drops from if you do its gimmick correctly. You have to kill all, I think, 4 or 5 of them that are present in that room without being hit once, which you do by using the stop spell. And yeah, I think it's a neat gimmick. The design is literally just a much larger Shadow, so for design and aesthetic, that's gonna be a 3 out of 5. Mostly because it just feels kind of lazy to just scale up a Shadow and not really do anything different with it, other than it being like more hunched. And for gameplay, the gimmick is alright. You know, it's a little bit neat, basic, but it works. So that's going to be a 4 out of 5. And the overall for it is going to be a 4 out of 5. You know, not as good as the regular Shadow, but it's a neat little secret they added into Final Mix. The Soldier. The step up from the regular Shadow. The Soldier's attacks hit a little bit harder. They move a little bit more wacky. You know, they smack you up a little bit better, as I said a second ago. Excuse me. They're not found nearly as often as the Shadows, as they're only in a few worlds. They're only in 5 worlds, in fact, as you can see on the little screenshot. Which I don't know if I'm misremembering, but I thought they were in more worlds. When I first played the game. Maybe they could have changed that in between vanilla Kingdom Hearts and Final Mix. But yeah, they're basically just the foot soldiers of the Heartless. You fight a decent number of them. For aesthetic and design, that's going to be another 4 out of 5. And for gameplay, that's going to be another 4 out of 5, so it's going to be overall 4 out of 5 Scrumpy. I think they're an absolutely great enemy design and gameplay wise. The Stealth Soldier, a secret variant of the regular soldier. They're also a gimmick fight where you have to fight them in under a certain amount of time because they will go invisible if you don't track them down quick enough. So the stop spell helps. You find them in Hollow Bastion in the late game after you've done most of what you're supposed to do in there. And they have a 35% chance to drop an energy stone. Design is going to be 3 out of 5 because, it's just a recolor of the regular soldier. It doesn't really look any different at all. It just looks a little bit more sneaky, And gameplay is going to be a 3 out of 5 too because the going invisible and being really fast gimmick just isn't that interesting to me. But I feel like it is better than some other gameplay on the list, Large body. They appear in a few different worlds in the game, usually at the center of a group of Heartless, or in like the tournaments, they can also be in small groups and squads themselves. Their gimmick is that you cannot damage them from the front, but you can damage them from the sort of back part of the sides and their back, which is a neat gimmick, but I think could have been refined a little bit more because it feels like they attack way too quickly from a previous attack, so they can sort of deny you your damage because by the time you actually get behind them and sort of reorient yourself with the very clunky camera KH1 has, they've already tried to attack you again, and they've instantly spun around. So gameplay is going to be 3 out of 5. I think the gimmick was really nice, but it could have used a little bit more testing and refining. And aesthetic is going to be a solid 5 out of 5. I think the actual look of it is pretty cool. You can tell exactly what its gimmick is just by looking at it. And I think the random extra details, like the chains around the hands that don't really get any sort of elaboration, but are just sort of an implication, are really cool. So yeah, that's it for the large body. The Red Nocturne, a spellcasting Heartless which floats around and has weird little chicken legs. You can find them in a handful of worlds and also the tournaments. They're weak to blizzard magic and have a chance to drop blaze shards if you want to grind them for drops, but they aren't particularly useful. The Red Nocturne is just a very meh enemy. For both aesthetic and gameplay, I'm just going to give it a 3 because it's just very simple, not terrible or anything, and not terribly annoying either. It's just a super simple enemy, both design-wise and gameplay-wise. I like that its little wizard hat is a neat little Final Fantasy reference. But yeah, other than that, it's just very basic and simple. The Blue Rhapsody, which is basically just a blizzard version of the Red Nocturne. It drops frost shards instead of blaze shards. So yeah, it's basically exactly the same as the Red Nocturne, but blizzard instead. You can use fire magic to destroy them quickly. And same thing that I've said about the Red Nocturne applies to Blue Rhapsodies too. It's a 3 out of 5. It's not terrible or anything, but it's also not really that amazing. The Yellow Opera. So it drops thunder shards, right? You can find it in actually most of the worlds in the game. Its attack, it never really gets a chance to let off. But when it does, it just casts thunder around itself. You can destroy them very quickly with gravity. And yeah, 3 out of 5 again, same thing as the last ones. Green Requiem. They are a support version of the last 3 spellcasting Heartless, which have a chance of dropping bright shards as their specific drop. They have Cure, but they rarely ever use it. So for gameplay, they're actually going to get a 2 out of 5 because they just don't really do much. Maybe even a 1 out of 5, but a 2 out of 5 would be fine. And for design, it's same 3 out of 5, so it's still a 3 out of 5. It's just average. You can use gravity to defeat them quickly, and they are found in half of the worlds of the game. The Black Ballad, which has a 10 to 100% chance of dropping a lightning stone. This is another secret puzzle Heartless, which has a chance of appearing in a deep jungle. It's basically one of those sort of games where you have to keep track of a ball in a cup. You know, you just gotta keep track of the right one and then smack it. Do that a few times till it's defeated, and then it will drop lightning stones. Yeah, so for gameplay, I'm just gonna have to give this one a 3 out of 5 because the game is just like super duper simple. The gimmick is super duper simple. You don't even need to like look up how to deal with it like you do with some of the other secret gimmick Heartless. But for aesthetic, that's going to be a golden scrumpy. It's going to be a first golden scrumpy. I think it just looks great. The color palette on it, you know, the black and the red with the white accents just works so much better for the actual model than the other magic casting Heartless color schemes do. And excuse me if I, you know, if I sis a lot or whatever. It's just a speech impediment. But alright, yeah, that's it for the Black Ballad. It's going to be a golden scrumpy overall, because if something gets a golden scrumpy in either category, I'm going to automatically award it that rank. So yeah, on to the next one. The Power Wild. A Heartless that is a monkey. That's pretty much it. You find them in Deep Jungle and also some of the tournament fights. They're basically just a stronger version of the soldier, I feel like. They can do a little bit more damage with their scratch attacks and can be a little bit more annoying with their slide attacks, but I think they're overall, for both gameplay and aesthetics, a 4 out of 5. I think it's a, I don't know, I feel like they didn't go into the Heartless thing as much as they should have, but I think it's still really nice, both aesthetically and gameplay-wise anyway. So yeah, that's the Power Wild. The Bouncy Wild, which is basically just female version of the Power Wild. It has a slingshot, and it likes to jump around and pelt little pebbles at you with its slingshot. You can defeat them very quickly with fire if you lock onto them. They're very bouncy, very hard to hit sometimes, especially in the early game, or if you're a noob, you know. Yeah, that's basically it. For aesthetic, I'm just gonna I don't know. I don't think it really looks as good as the regular Power Wild because all they really did was just make a female version of it. So that's gonna be a 3 out of 4, 3 out of 5. Excuse me. My brain's a little bit fried right now. 3 out of 5 for the aesthetics, and for gameplay, it's gonna be a also 3 out of 5 because I don't know. It's a little bit annoying early game. You know, when you're first playing the game too. Because you don't really have a good way to catch up with him. You kind of have to use fire unless Donald and Goofy catch him off guard. Their drops aren't really amazing or anything. They're pretty generic drop-wise. But yeah, that's the Bouncy Wild. The Sniper Wild, another gimmick Heartless that you can find in late game Traverse Town in the 2nd District. How their gimmick works is that if they actually fully spot you, they will consistently pelt you with the pebble attack from their slingshot, and are very hard to hit and do a decent amount of damage. They're very annoying. What you have to do is, you know, resort to the old stop spell and keep destroying them as they spawn. And I think it takes about 4 or 5 different ways of them spawning before you can get the max amount of drops, which are all going to be power stones. From a 35 to 100% drop rate chance. And excuse me. And yeah, for the aesthetics, I'm gonna give this a 4 out of 5 because I think it looks decently better than the Bouncy Wild, just from the color choice and the extra sort of accents. You know, I think it makes the model pop out a little bit better. And for gameplay, I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5 again, because it's just like the Stealth Soldier and the Giga Shadow, where you just have to use stop on it. I feel like that's kind of an overdone gimmick with these Secret Heartless, and isn't really much of a challenge to players who know exactly what they're doing, you know. But alright, that's the Sniper Wild. the Air Soldier, a flying Heartless that looks very, very cool, is found in about half the worlds of the game. They usually spawn in large groups, stuff like that. They can be very, very annoying gameplay wise. They hit decently hard even into the late game for some reason, which I find very odd for something introduced so early on. But yeah, it's basically just a flying version of the soldier, except it's way more annoying and will lead to the occasional HP, just an entire chunk taken out of your bar, maybe even the occasional death. I think for one of my few deaths I've had while playing the Steam version of Kingdom Hearts, like two or three out of like the 5 or 6 in total I've had were to the Air Soldier, because it just absolutely caught me off guard and just smacked me in the back when I was busy fighting something else. So yeah, for gameplay, I'm gonna give it a 2. I feel like it attacks too quickly and like doesn't telegraph enough, or makes like, I think it should make like some type of sound or something. Because like I'd said earlier, if it's like behind your camera, it could just sneak up on you with that kick slam attack and just annihilate your health bar some if you don't have high defense. The drops aren't particularly good either, so gameplay is going to be 2 out of 5. Aesthetic, I think, is going to be a 4 out of 5. I think it looks very aesthetically pleasing. A little bit more on the random side, but it definitely looks like how a Heartless should. They definitely got that down. So overall, it's going to be 3 out of 5 Scrumpy. The Bandit, which is the basic enemy in Agrabah, and they appear a few times in the tournament too, I think. I think bandits are great. They have like a solid gameplay. Drops are, very mediocre. They do basic sword swipe attacks, have an attack where they throw their sword at you and then they wait for a little bit for it to return, which leaves them open. And yeah, for gameplay, I think it's going to be a 4 out of 5. And for aesthetic, I think it's also going to be a 5 out of 5. I think they nail the Desert Bandit aesthetic perfectly, and they fit into the world very well. This is like a very good example of how to do a Heartless well and make it fit into the world organically. It's like the Power Wild, but done better, on the aesthetic level at least. So yeah, that's a 5 out of 5 for the Bandit. The Fat Bandit, which is a Agrabah reskin of the large body. They basically work exactly the same, where you can't hit them from the front, but I think their attacks are a little bit more annoying with the flamethrower attack and fireball spit. You can use gravity to cheese them, but this list assumes you're just using like non-cheese tactics, at least when it comes to the gameplay rating, But yeah, their drops are pretty mediocre too. A high potion is nice, but like sometimes you will lose more health than it's worth to get a high potion for, when they're in the sort of big groups in the tournaments. And Olympus Coliseum, excuse me, I needed to think there for a second. They can be very much annoying. But yeah, I think for gameplay, it's going to be a 2 out of 5. Like I can't rate them any higher than a 2 out of 5 on gameplay, because their attacks can just be annoying. They have that same sort of problem that the regular large body does, where there's not enough wind up or not enough cooldown in between their attacks, and they'll just like 180 snap onto you right when you get behind them to smack them. And for aesthetics, it's going to be a 3 out of 5, because I just feel like they aren't unique enough from the large body. I feel like they definitely could have maybe decorated it some more like the regular Bandit Heartless to have it fit in with Agrabah better. But yeah, that's going to be an overall 2 out of 5. I don't want to give them a 3 out of 5, because they've just caused me too much annoyance with their sort of spawning in crowds thing and like having very spammy attacks. The Pot Spider, which appear in Agrabah and Olympus Coliseum during some of the tournament fights. They have very pitiful drops. They're basically just that. They're just a pot with legs. It like doesn't really look much like a spider either. It doesn't really look much like a Heartless. It's just a pot with legs, So for aesthetics, I'm sorry, but they're getting a 0 out of 5 Scrumpy. They're just it's just it's just a pot with legs. Like you can't really even tell it's a Heartless, which I guess is like the point since regular non-pot spider pots spawn around Agrabah, and sometimes they just so happen to be pot spiders. But I don't know. I'm just not really feeling the design at all. And for gameplay, they're very simple enemies, so I'm just gonna give them a 2 out of 5. So that's gonna be a 1 out of 5 Scrumpy overall for the pot spider. The barrel spider, which also doesn't particularly look like a spider, but at least looks more like a Heartless. Basically, they're just stronger versions of the pot spider, and they have a gimmick where they can explode if you hit them with physical attacks or fire magic, which can actually be useful because you can use them like an explosive barrel in Doom, and hit them with fire when they're in the middle of a crowd of other Heartless, and it will damage those other Heartless, which I think is a neat gimmick. So for gameplay, I'm going to be giving it a 3 out of 5 at the very minimum. It's simple like the pot spider. It's got very simple gameplay, but I think being able to use them as a sort of mobile explosive barrel to use against other Heartless is really cool. But for aesthetic, it's only going to get a 1 out of 5 because it's literally just a barrel with legs and an eye popping out. Like, not much to see there, The pot scorpion, which is found in Agrabah as a secret gimmick Heartless. And I think pretty much the very end of Agrabah, like that last courtyard next to the big 2 doors. Its gimmick is that you can't hit it normally. You have to parry one of its attacks, parry or guard one of its attacks, and when it flips over, you can attack it. And it has a 35 to 100% chance to drop a mithril stone upon being defeated. For aesthetics, I think it's a solid 3 out of 5. It's much better looking than the pot or barrel spider that comes before it. And for gameplay, it's also going to be 3 out of 5. Yeah, it's pretty simple. You just have to parry or guard its attack and then hit it to do damage. But it's still neat. It's still all right. So yeah, that's going to be the pot scorpion. The Search Ghost, which appear in Halloween Town, Monstro, Atlantica, and Traverse Town, which I think it's very odd they appear in Atlantica and Monstro both. Not really Traverse Town, since that's sort of, the hub world, the generic in between. But I think they should have been like Traverse Town and Halloween Town exclusive for obvious reasons. It's very jarring, they even appear in Monstro and Atlantica at all. But yeah, the gameplay is that they just do a decent damage attack. They're very weak to fire and blizzard magic. And they do this annoying thing where, like, right before you hit them, they teleport away. And it's like a whole 2 or 3 seconds before they reappear. So for aesthetic, judging them strictly for Halloween Town, this is going to be a 5 out of 5. But for gameplay, it's going to be a 3 out of 5. Because, like I said, they appear in very unfitting worlds. In Atlantica especially, they're annoying because you have to already juggle, swimming, and then you have to go deal with them at the same time. And their teleporting gimmick isn't really interesting, and it's just kind of annoying more than anything. So I think I'm going to give them a 3 out of 5 overall. The Grand Ghost. It appears in Monstro's stomach specifically in the late game, and has a 35 to 100% chance of dropping a Frost Stone. It's a much bigger version of the Search Ghost that looks much nicer aesthetically. Its gimmick is that you have to target it with healing items to do damage to it. So, potions, high potions, mega potions, etc. It is kind of finicky though, because you have to get very close to it and then target it while using the menu. And that can be kind of annoying, especially when, it smacks you away from itself. Traditional attacks like Keyblade and Magic, they don't do any damage to it. You can only damage it with items. For aesthetic, it's going to have to get a golden Scrumpy because I think the colors look amazing on the Search Ghost model. It being bigger and more opposing helps, And also just the name, the Grand Ghost. Like, that's really cool. But for actual gameplay, it's a 3 out of 5 because it just feels kind of It just feels very finicky, feels very gimmicky, which I know all the secret Heartless are, but you know, it feels particularly gimmicky. But yeah, it's going to be a golden scrumpy for the Gray and Ghost. The Sea Neon. It is a heartless jellyfish that are fast and attack in numbers. They have a low health. They're weak to Blizzard and Fire Magic. They're only in Atlantica. They don't really have good drops. I think they're kind of annoying to fight. And obviously being underwater doesn't help. And the design is just not very interesting. So for everything overall, I'm just going to give them a 2 out of 5. I don't really like Sea Neons at all. The Sheltering Zone. They're a much bigger Sea Neon. They're weak to fire. They do more damage, have more health. And there's a chance whenever they're defeated to split into 1 to 4 Sea Neons, which is annoying. Their gimmick is annoying, their design is boring, it's literally just a bigger version of the Sea Neon. I'm just gonna give it a 1 out of 5 Scrumpy overall. I'm not really feeling the Sheltering Zone at all. The Screwdiver, which is a sort of a fish head Heartless that has a trident. You fight them in Atlantica. Fire magic stuns them. Excuse me if I have trouble talking from this point in the list on. Like I said, it's very, very late, but I rarely get chances to record, so I take them as they come, you know. But basically, yeah, they're just sort of diver merman guys. The aesthetic is going to be a 3 out of 5. It definitely feels like a Heartless, but it's also very nonsensical. You know, it's also very wacky. And the gameplay is also a 3 out of 5. It's just like they do not particularly special or not particularly annoying attacks. You know, completely average. So yeah, it's going to be a 3 out of 5 for the Screwdiver. The Aqua Tank, which is a anglerfish Heartless. It just sort of dopes around the seas swimming in Atlantica and doesn't really directly try to target you unless you actively provoke it. Fire magic slows them down a little bit. They have a decent amount of chunky health, and mega potions are also a nice drop, but they really drop them at 4%. They're often carrying Screwdivers under them, which you know, is an alright gimmick. I don't know, for both aesthetics and gameplay, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. I feel like it's also a very average Heartless. It fits Atlantica especially well, so I think it fits into its world specifically well, you know. The White Knight, which is a spooky mummy Heartless that appears in Halloween Town. All offensive magic is apparently very effective against White Knights. They're very easy to dodge, but can cause a lot of damage. They have low health. I think their attacks are predictable, but in a fun kind of way. It is kind of annoying that they're invincible whenever they do their sort of spinning scratch attack. But Kingdom Hearts 1 has a problem, you know, has problems with enemies having too much iframes in general. But that's fine. For aesthetics, it's going to have to be a 5 out of 5. I think aesthetically it looks great as a Heartless and fits the world very well. And for gameplay, it's just going to be a 3 out of 5. No, 4 out of 5. I feel like the gameplay is better than the average Heartless has. You know, their attacks are nicely telegraphed and predictable. They're easy to dodge, you know, fun to sort of dance around. The drops aren't great or anything, but it doesn't really matter because you defeat them in such mass anyway. The mega potions you can sometimes get from them are nice. But yeah, it's going to be a 5 out of 5 for the White Knight. The Gargoyle. They're in Halloween Town. Their drops aren't really that good. Arrow magic can stagger them. Basically, they're just like kind of reskinned air soldiers. I'm not really liking the choice of colors, and I feel like they could have gone with something darker, given that it's supposed to be in Halloween Town. They fly around, can teleport. I think they can occasionally shoot a projectile. They're just a more developed version of the air soldier. Less annoying most of the time, more interesting to fight. I think the aesthetic is completely average, and the gameplay is a 4 out of 5 just because it's more interesting and varied than the Air Soldier. So yeah, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 overall. Maybe even a 3 out of 5, but no, 4 out of 5, yeah. The Chimera, which is a Halloween Town exclusive gimmick Heartless, which is a failed laboratory experiment by Dr. Finkelstein or something, I'm guessing. I mean, he gets up to that type of stuff in the story anyway. It's a slow and lumbering creature that does a decent amount of damage due to it attacking relentlessly when it's angry. It can summon gargoyles along with it, and how its gimmick works is that whenever its head pops up, you can actually do damage to it, but it's pretty much its actual like real health bar is it's basically invincible unless you hit the head after it pops out. It has a 20 to 40% chance of dropping a blazing stone, which is alright, but this isn't really like, I don't know, it feels a little bit too annoying to fight to be grinded necessarily, to, grind either XP or drop zone necessarily to even be worth it. But I think aesthetically it's going to be a 5 out of 5, and gameplay wise it's just average 3 out of 5. So overall it's going to be a 4 out of 5 for the Halloween Town Chimera, something like that. The Pirate. They appear in Neverland in the tournament fights. They're basically just a pirate-themed version of the bandit. They have a sword, they have very similar attacks and telegraphs. You can parry them and knock them on their butt for a second. Fire magic is very effective against them, and it's easy to drag them into a corner. I think you can parry all of their attacks, actually. I might be wrong about that, but I think they're one of the few sword-wielding enemies that you can actually parry all of their attacks. I think aesthetically they're going to be 3 out of 5. I feel like they didn't make them piratey enough, and I really appreciate the detail of the sword having a face on it, though, even though it does feel a little bit overplayed when you see them in numbers. Like, I feel like they could have reserved the sword face for like a special gimmick version of it, or like, like a pirate captain or something that sort of leads the other ones around. You know what I mean, though. For gameplay, though, it's going to be honestly a 4 out of 5. Around the same level as the Bandit. It's very enjoyable, smooth gameplay, easy to understand telegraphs, and very fun to engage with attacks. Their drops aren't particularly great or anything. So yeah, it's going to be a 4 out of 5 overall for the Pirate. The Air Pirate, which appear in Neverland in the tournament fights. As you can tell by looking at it, it's very much an air pirate. Although I think the aesthetic itself isn't piratey enough at all. I feel like the wings should have been more of a sort of mechanical contraption they wear, kind of like the air soldiers. To fit in more with a pirate theme. Maybe it's like steampunk pirates or something. I think the animations are actually very nice with the sort of squash and stretch cartoon sort of thing it does with its fist where it grows whenever it tries to smack you. Winds up its fist like Popeye too. I think that's very unique and charming. So for aesthetics, I'm gonna have to give it a 3 out of 5. It's just average because it just doesn't look piratey enough. I feel like they could have done more with the design, And for gameplay, it's a 3 out of 5 because it's just a more tolerable version of the Air Soldier. Their telegraphs are a lot bigger, but their attacks aren't particularly special or memorable or anything. Their drops aren't really great they aren't really great or anything. So yeah, that's it for the Air Pirate. It's just going to be average, 3 out of 5. The Battleship, which is a Heartless pirate ship. It flies around. It can fly very high, actually, in both the Neverland and the tournament fights. It being less annoying in Neverland since you have the ability to fly around in the sections it's in, but more annoying in the tournaments since if it gets into a corner, it's going to fly straight up and it's going to be much harder to hit it. But I think aesthetically and both gameplay-wise, it's going to be a 4 out of 5. I think the gameplay is neat. Being able to actually break parts of the pirate ship off and it actually affecting its attack patterns is an especially nice touch. And I think the developers put a good amount of effort into that. And I think the actual aesthetic of a Heartless pirate ship is pretty good. Yeah, I think it looks pretty aesthetically pleasing. I feel like they maybe could have gone for darker colors on it, but that goes for a lot of the final mix recolors. And I will not step into that pot of worms. I will not get into that pot of worms specifically. You can use gravity to cheese them, but like I said, we don't really count that. So it's going to be a 4 out of 5 overall for the pirate ship. The battleship, excuse me. The jet balloon. It is a secret gimmick that you can find on the Neverland deck sometimes. It has a 20 to 100% chance to drop a dazzling stone when you defeat it. So basically how it works is that it only appears when you reach a very, very large amount of money in your wallet, your in-game wallet. And as it attacks you, you lose money and it absorbs that money. And if it takes too much, like I think if you drop down to either some type of threshold or just straight up zero, it will leave. But I just think it's not really worth it to fight. I can't remember if it actually rewards you with a lot of money for defeating it or anything, but the Dazzling Stone is not worth it. Its attacks are also very annoying, and it's constantly attacking too, so I think you either have to use the stop spell or try to catch it off guard if you actually intend to, take it down and stuff. But yeah, I'm sorry, overall it's just going to be a 2 out of 5. It's a recycled design, very weird and annoying gimmick, and a very drab gameplay too, drab and annoying gameplay. But I don't think it's like absolutely terrible or worthy of a 1 or a 0 out of 5. So yeah, that's the jet balloon. The dark ball. It is a ball of darkness, who would have guessed. It appears in, I think, literally every world in the game as a random late game encounter, as well as being in the tournament fights too. It has very, very poor drops with only 1% high potion and 1% lucid crystal, which isn't really much of a problem because you fight them in such mass anyway. They're weak to thunder magic and arrow magic, or it's at least effective against them. Aesthetically, I think it's very nice. It's very much a Heartless, and it also feels like something from Final Fantasy too. It feels very Final Fantasy-esque. But gameplay-wise, its attacks are kind of annoying. It has that thing that a lot of the late game enemies have where it has way too many iframes. And also if you're unprepared and they gang up on you, you could just get stun locked into absolute oblivion. Just get destroyed. And the Pac-Man munching attack isn't particularly enjoyable to fight. I don't feel like, at least, because it's sort of like the Air Soldier where they can not really telegraph it at all or not make any noises and just hit you from the back with it when you're completely off guard or busy fighting something else, and that could take an entire chunk of your health out. So overall for the Dark Ball, I like the look, I hate the gameplay, so I'm just gonna have to give it a 3 out of 5. Just average. The Defender, a very large shield carrying Heartless that can use magic attacks, has very noticeable wind-ups and telegraphs. Has the same gimmick as the large body where you can't hit it from the front, but you can actually parry it and then hit it from the front, and it's easier to hit it from the side than the large body is. It only appears in 3 worlds in the game, and you can cheese it with gravity. It has a 0.2% chance of dropping the Defender Shield for Goofy, which, if I remember, is just sort of a meh shield, like an alright shield, but it's better than most of the stuff you get until you get into the late game. But by the time you fight these guys, you're about to be in the late game anyway, so I don't really know how good the Defender Shield would be overall. I could be remembering that incorrectly, but I don't think I ever used it for Goofy, like the one time that I did get it. But yeah, I think they're the large body done better, gameplay-wise. The aesthetic is also very nice, like a big dog face on a shield with a buff meathead guy carrying it, buff meathead gorilla guy. I think for aesthetics and gameplay both, it's going to be a 5 out of 5, honestly. It's I think the most well-designed of these sort of late-game enemies. It's not intolerable to fight. I think it's pretty enjoyable to fight, and the aesthetic is pretty nice. And, it's also very unique because I think it's one of the only enemies that can drop a weapon as an item drop. So yeah, it's going to be a 5 out of 5 Scrumpy for the Defender. The Wyvern, which if you guys don't know, is basically just a subspecies of a dragon that doesn't have the front two legs. A Wyvern Heartless. It doesn't at all look like a Heartless, but that's, it's alright, that's fine. That's acceptable at least. I think it looks unique enough, not bad or anything. Their actual attacks aren't particularly annoying, but some of the places they put them in Hollow Bastion can be. But in the other worlds, Deep Jungle, Agrabah, and Traverse Town, I think their encounters are completely fine. You can use gravity to cheese it, and arrow to mitigate damage and stagger them. Because while its attacks, I think I remember they don't really do that much damage. Have a very wide hit range, and it's very easy for them to hit you with their attacks. But yeah, they're basically just like a much more tolerable version of the air soldier and air pirate. I think they look nice aesthetically, not very much like a Heartless at all, but a nice aesthetic regardless. And their gameplay is decent enough. It's decent. So I'm gonna give them a 3 out of 5. Perfectly average Heartless. Perfectly average. The Wizard, which is a Wizard Heartless. It casts spells and stuff. It can cast a few different spells, which are just the elemental spells. The only really annoying spell is the Thunder spell because it does it for a few seconds. It can do a decent amount of damage to your party members since they usually aren't close enough to it to dodge its lightning strikes like you can as the player. And it has iframes for that entire period of I think 5 or 6 seconds, which is very annoying. I forgot how long the Thunder spell actually lasts, so excuse me. But yeah, you get what I mean though. It's kind of annoying a little bit. They also have a teleportation, which is like the Search Ghost teleportation, where it just wastes time. It wastes your time. It doesn't really make them any more difficult to beat. It's just a time waster. And yeah, I think for gameplay, it's going to be a 2 out of 5. For aesthetic, it's going to be a 5 out of 5, though. I think they definitely look really cool. Very much reminds me of Final Fantasy while also looking good as a Heartless. They're in pretty much every world in the game. You can use the stop spell to cheese them, which I think you should actually. This is like one of the few enemies I do encourage using the stop spell on besides the gimmick Heartless. And they have a 0.2% chance to drop the Wizard's Relic, which is an alright staff, I think, for Donald. It's not as good as his super late game unlocks, but it's pretty alright, I think. But overall, I'm very torn on what rating to give this, so I'm just going to give it a 3 out of 5. Just average. Because I think the gameplay is pretty mediocre, pretty but the aesthetic is great. And I think the actual animations look pretty good too. So yeah, it's going to be a 3 out of 5 for the Wizard. Alrighty, now for our first reoccurring mini-boss, or boss Heartless, the Behemoth. Yeah, basically they don't really have that many attacks. They're very slow, but they have a lot of health, and they appear like 4 or 5 times total, which is annoying. I think they definitely should have reconsidered that. But I'm guessing like the dev team was like, oh, we put so much time into this massive chunky model and did all this stuff for it. Now we got to make the players fight it like 5 times. It has a chance to drop the Omega Arts, I think the first time you fight it specifically, but not any of the other times. And I'm just going to be rating the Behemoth sort of variations as the same. It's just 2 out of 5, I'm sorry. The Behemoth and all of its variations are an absolute time waster, and it feels like a slog every time you fight them. Like, unless you use Strike Raid. But I don't really ever have a large amount of magic stores whenever I play Kingdom Hearts. I usually like to go a glass cannon Keyblade build, and like even then that still takes a while to just carve through all of that health. Like, that's very annoying. But yeah, overall, it's just going to be 2 out of 5 the Behemoth. Just annoying, slow. Uh, design isn't particularly good or anything. I think the name is really cool, though. You know, like the idea that it's just sort of a massive monster. I think that's neat, but yeah, 2 out of 5 overall, though. The Destroyed Behemoth. So yeah, it's the Behemoth, but it's exactly the same, and it has more health. Yippee. 2 out of 5. The Arch Behemoth. It's exactly the same, and I think has more or less health than the other two. 1 out of 5. I'm tired of seeing behemoths, and I'm tired of fighting behemoths. It's a slog every time. Yeah, get out of here, behemoth. The Invisibles, which you can find in the end of the world and the later half of the tournament fights. They're a Heartless with a big sword. They're very difficult gameplay-wise. I think it's the most like another enemy that I fully encourage you to cheese using gravity or stop, because they're super duper annoying. I'm gonna have to give them a golden scrumpy for aesthetic, though. I think they're genuinely like one of the best designs the series, one of the best designs the series has ever had for an enemy, just like aesthetically. But the gameplay, the gameplay, that's that's horrific, man. Like, that's rough. Like, the gameplay is actually like torture. They have so many iframes. Their attacks do so many damage. Excuse me. Excuse me. I'm being illiterate right now. I'm just like spitting because I'm so absolutely disappointed by the Invisible. I've had to suffer so much at the hands of the Invisible when I'm like lower level in playthroughs that I've been doing, right? The gameplay is genuinely a 0 out of 5. Like, it's just not fun to fight. They have way too many iframes, they send way too many at you at once, and they can do way too much damage to you way too quickly. If you are not prepared, you will die. Like, you're guaranteed pretty much to take a death. They're super tanky, do a lot of damage, like I already said, in big numbers. But I'm going to have to give them the golden scrumpy, because I gave them the golden scrumpy for aesthetics. Even though I think the gameplay is absolutely terrible for the Invisible, and they really should have played tested them more. But yeah, golden scrumpy. Good job, Invisible. You earned it just off of how you look, and literally no other reason. So yeah. The Angel Star, which is a spell-casting Heartless that does a lot of damage. It flaps around its wings. It looks very nonsensical, I must say. Very terrible poor drops, only found in End of the World and some of the tournament fights. Basically, you should definitely cheese these guys with gravity too. They have iframes a lot and do a lot of damage with their attacks. I don't think they look particularly good aesthetically wise outside of their very, very nice looking animations. You know, at least for the idle, you know, the sort of just flying around, flapping around animations. I think it's super duper smooth, especially from a game from the time. And yeah, aesthetically, I just give them a 3 out of 5 scrumpy. And gameplay wise, a 2 out of 5. It's kind of annoying. Its attacks are kind of annoying. You know, having all those iframes too is also very annoying. But yeah, I'm just gonna rate them 3 out of 5 in total in general. You know, average, completely average. The Neo Shadow, which was which is basically the regular Shadow's taller, edgier cousin. For aesthetics, I'm gonna have to give them a oh, no, excuse me. Let me actually explain what they do first. They are a gimmick Heartless that appears in packs in the Linked Worlds part of Into the Worlds. You can find them in the late game. They have a 35% chance of dropping a Stormy Stone. It appears in a group of, I think, 6 to 8 or 6 to 9, something like that. A very large group, anyway. They it's been so long since I've actually like fought these. I'm trying to remember exactly how the gameplay worked, but I think they're basically just a stronger Shadow that can self-heal. But for aesthetics, I'm going to have to give them the Golden Scrumpy. I think they are next to the regular Shadow, the perfect Heartless design, and they're the perfect evolution of the Shadow's design. But for actual gameplay, it's like a 3 out of 5. But, they're getting the Golden Scrumpy anyway. So, yeah, congratulations, Neo Shadow. You look really cool, and I'm glad they brought it back for Kingdom Hearts 2 as a less annoying version. The Black Fungus. Wow, oh, this is another one of those enemies, man. Alright, they appear in Agrabah, Halloween Town, and Hollow Bastion in specific rooms. And I think also in the tournament, like 1 or 2 times. The Black Fungus are very annoying. They're also another time waster Heartless. They walk up to you, spit out poison that will most definitely damage your party members and waste their healing and their healing items. And can also do a good amount of damage to you if you aren't careful of it. After you take about half their health bar out, they will get mad and turn into metal, which makes them completely invincible for I think 10 seconds or some period that might be longer than that. Excuse me, I think it is longer than that. The drops are good because I think you use the mystery mold to help craft the Ultima weapon, but I don't really bother with crafting and synthesis in general. But they're super annoying to fight. The aesthetic is boring. It's just a dark version of the regular Mushroom Heartless, which I didn't put on the list because it's not hostile. It's just like a puzzle. It's just like a puzzle Heartless. So I'm just gonna have to give them overall. I'm gonna have to give them a 1 out of 5. I just don't like them personally. It's just like extra opinion on there. They're just another time waster, and it feels like you're wasting a stop spell on them because they have so little actual health. But at the same time, it's much quicker just to use a stop spell and then wait for their Metal Mario invincibility stuff to wear off. Alrighty then, and for the first boss of the game, the tutorial boss, that being Dark Side. Yeah, I think it's a perfectly average 3 out of 5 boss. It looks great aesthetically. It's got very predictable attacks. You fight it like 3 different times, which I think is kind of wacky, but I guess they had to. I guess they put in all that effort in the model like the Behemoth, so they had to reuse it. I don't know. It would have been cool if there was like some type of maybe extreme variant you fought during the tournament or something. But yeah, it's a perfectly average 3 out of 5. I don't really have anything to say about Darkseid. It's just the tutorial boss that you fight again near the end of the game. That's about it. Red armor, which is basically the opposite / guard armor, except you fight it during the Fill Cup. Sometimes it's just the arms and legs by itself, and I think only one time it's actually the full red armor. But aesthetically and gameplay wise, both, it's just average. It's just a recolor of the much better looking guard and opposite armor, and it doesn't do anything different, I think, besides just doing more damage. And so yeah, that's it for the red armor. It's going to be 3 out of 5. Opposite armor and guard armor are going to be rated at the same time, and I'm sorry if I forget to put both of their info blobs up on the screen at the same time. But basically, yeah, they're just like floating armor. They do a decent amount of damage. I think they do actually pretty high damage for whenever you fight it at like level 3 or 5 or whatever. If you're playing on critical, you might actually have to use a potion, which is like the first time you do that. First time you probably have to do that. I definitely like the regular guard armor more than opposite armor, though. I think the actual like gimmick of all the limbs being separate entities is very cool, and I think it was a unique gameplay gimmick for the time when Kingdom Hearts 1 came out, actually. I might be wrong about that. I'm probably wrong about that. But I think this is like the earliest game you see this sort of type of gimmick of a single enemy being made up of multiple enemies in. Not counting like a boss that has like tentacles or whatever. I don't think that really counts as the same thing. So yeah, overall for guard and opposite armor both, I'm going to have to give them a 4 out of 5. The Trickmaster, which is the boss of Wonderland. It's a very easy fight if you have Jungle King if you go to, Deep Jungle first, which I recommend you do actually, because Jungle King is, it's just a straight upgrade to the regular Keyblade. The much longer swing and the better jump is just, better in general. And it makes Trickmaster particularly easy because you don't actually have to jump onto the table to attack him, or try to get that very small attack window with a regular Keyblade. You can just sort of jump up and smack him in the butt, and it makes the fight much easier and much quicker. But yeah, his design is very unique. His colors are kind of wacky, but it at least fits Wonderland and the Bazaar room you fight him in specifically. So for aesthetics, he's a 4 out of 5, and for gameplay, he's a 4 out of 5 too. Ifrit's Horn is also a good drop. It's obviously one of the sort of early game tutorial equipable items that speedrunners like to use. But yeah, that's going to be a 4 out of 5 overall for the Trickmaster. The Stealth Sneak, which is the second half of the Stealth Sneak and Clayton boss, or one half of that full boss in Deep Jungle. When I was like 8, I was like super dyslexic, so I think I called these guys I think I think I called them sneak snakes, or like stealth snakes. Yeah, stealth snakes. So in honor of 8-year-old dyslexic me, I'm gonna be calling them, and the sneak army, I'm gonna be calling them stealth snakes. Which, I don't know, it's not at all a snake, but I feel like it's still a better name than a stealth sneak. Like that's that's such a weird name. I don't know if it was like a translation thing, or like what, or like when they were translating a game, if they just couldn't figure out what to name it. But it's just also a very redundant name. It's a Dr. Seuss-esque sort of wacky name. Aesthetically, they're literally just a chameleon, a big chameleon that's got a Heartless logo on it. So it's not really winning any awards for aesthetics, but it at least looks average. And for gameplay, it's a pretty fun fight too. Besides the iframes they get whenever they do that eye laser attack, which apparently is a glitch that they just didn't fix in Final Mix, which I believe, honestly, because I think, it's also like way too many iframes. It drags out the fight a little bit because its health could be literally like down to 1, and then it does that eye laser attack and saves itself for like the next 10 seconds. So yeah, the Stealth Sneak, it's going to be a 3 out of 5. The Sneak Army, or the Army Snake, as 8-year-old me would call it, they appear in the Hades Cup, and I think one of the other tournaments in the Coliseum. That's the only places they appear. They're basically just a more powerful version of the Stealth Snake. They just do more damage, have more health. I think you fight 2 of them at once in one of the rounds of the Hades Cup, which is, an interesting gimmick, actually. I think it's interesting. I think their aesthetic is a good step up, a good 4 out of 5, because the choice of colors and the camo pattern just looks better. And, it fits the army name, since that's sort of an army camouflage scheme. But yeah, the gameplay is exactly the same, but I am going to rate it a 4 out of 5 overall. I think it just is a better looking version of the Stealth Snake. The Pot Centipede from Agrabah. I don't actually have a lot to say about this guy. It's just, a centipede made up of pot snakes. Excuse me. A centipede made up of pot spiders. Sorry. It's the boss in the first part of Agrabah, whenever it kidnaps Jasmine. And yeah, the gimmick is alright. It's decent enough. I feel like its little like backtail attacks can be kind of annoying when you're trying to trail it. And I feel like the hitbox might be a little bit too wide on them. For aesthetic and gameplay both, I'm just going to have to give it a 2. I'm just not really feeling this one. I don't know, maybe because I just got, through with all of the other ones, but I'm just not feeling the Pot Centipede at all. So it's going to be a 2 out of 5 for the Pot Centipede. The Parasite Cage, which is the boss for Monstro. It's just sort of very weird. It just looks weird. Its attacks are kind of annoying on the second phase. I feel like it attacks like way too quickly. Sort of the same problem that the large body has, like I said before. It like doesn't have a long enough wind up in between attacks, and it like really likes to spam the acid on its second fight. The aesthetic is alright. It's going to be a solid 3 out of 5 all around, I feel like. It's just, I don't know, it just looks very surreal too. You know, not that that's a bad thing with Kingdom Hearts, but I feel like, you know what, never mind. I don't know, it would probably be harder to even make like something that fits into Monstro aesthetically. I think they did the best they could with what they had. But yeah, it's going to be a 3 out of 5 overall. Kurt Ziza, the secret boss of Agrabah. I think it looks great. I think it looks excellent. Its gameplay is amazing. Congratulations to the guy who actually won the contest to have his name put on this thing, because you will be forever immortalized in the form of a very cool looking video game enemy. I think it fits Agrabah perfectly. Like I said, I think I already said that, excuse me. It's very late and my brain is rotting out of my skull. Its gimmick is neat, you know, with the magic stuff only being able to damage it with certain magic types. You know, having to destroy the magic balls. So yeah, it's going to be a golden scrumpy overall. So yeah, congratulations to Kurt Ziza and the Heartless named after him. The Phantom. It is the secret boss of Neverland. It looks cool. Its gimmick is mediocre. Uh, you know, it's got a cool name too, the Phantom. You know, I think the name and the model go together well, really neatly. You basically have to use only certain types of attacks against it, depending on the color of the ball that's under it, while also using the stop spell on the clock to stop your uh, party members from completely disappearing. And they don't like die or anything either. They're just straight up removed from the fight, which I think is a level of stress and like tension that's missing from a lot of the fights in the game. Excuse me, a lot of the like secret bosses too, even. But yeah, I think the design is a solid 4 out of 5. But the actual gameplay is only a 3 out of 5. But I'll give it a 4 out of 5 anyway. It's all right, yeah. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it for this sort of a guide, walkthrough, and ranking personal opinions about all of the Heartless and some of the bosses, which are also Heartless, of Kingdom Hearts 1.5 HD Final Remix, Electric Boogaloo, Hyper Mega Edition, or whatever. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed my listing and opinions. I hope this was informative for at least some of you who haven't played the game in a while and at least wanted to, you know, get a little nostalgia bump or remember some of the enemies that this game had. So yeah, I hope you appreciate and like the video, or you know, whatever. You don't have to like it necessarily. You could dislike it if you want to, or just not be a fan of my videos in general. That's also fine. But yeah, I'll see you guys next time on whatever wacky thing I make.